I came across a post on Facebook yesterday. Actually, it's the second time, maybe even the third time I've read this person's writing. I got pretty fiery when I read it. I found myself saying exactly the same thing I've said every time I read this kind of stuff. When something like this, hang on, that's not how truth works. Now, before I go any farther, this is really not about criticizing another human being or human beings. There were parts of what that person wrote that I agree with. They're writing about trauma. And from my own extensive, unfortunately, experience, and from accompanying so many other people through trauma, I know how profoundly trauma changes us. Of course it does. I don't think anyone who has truly suffered would argue with that at all. But somewhere in the middle of reading those words, I realized what was bothering me. It wasn't the talk about trauma, and it wasn't the nervous system teaching that was going on. It wasn't the journaling ideas they presented. It was what was being claimed. I see it everywhere now. Another breakthrough, another method, another protocol, another nervous system practice, another journaling exercise, another promise, always presented with a similar articulation, a familiar implication that is, what are you missing? I understand why people buy these promises. I have. When you're exhausted, when you've lived through trauma, when grief has gutted and hollowed you out, when you've tried just about everything, and none of it has quite reached that cavernous place that hurts, that just wants to feel better, certainty becomes incredibly seductive. We all want someone to tell us, here, this is it. I understand that longing. I've lived that longing. I have spent years living inside of trauma, grief, addiction, recovery, profound loss, illness, heartbreak, devastation, rebuilding a life more times than I ever imagined I would have to. As I record this today, it's July the 16th of 2026. 5 years ago today, my home burned to the ground. I lost everything. 4 years ago today, the love of my life left without explanation. And 4 years ago today, another deeply important relationship in my life fractured. 3 years ago today, that same man that left returned back home broken with a terminal cancer diagnosis. 7 months later, he was gone. I tell you this because those experiences and several more I didn't mention shaped everything else I'm about to say today. Alongside my own life, I've had the privilege of accompanying countless other human beings through grief, trauma, betrayal, addiction, devastating loss, and chapters of life they never imagined they would have to live through. And somewhere in those many years, there was a question that just refused to leave me. The question was, why do we often know so much and yet still struggle to live what we know? We still struggle to live with what we understand, still struggle to live with what we've learned. Not occasional struggle, but consistently. Why? Why can we understand ourselves so deeply and still be unable to live from what we understand? Well, that question became my life's work. In many ways, it became my mission. And after all these years, I have become deeply certain of one thing. And it's not because someone told me, it's not because I read another book, and it's not because neuroscience proved it. Life proved it. My own direct experience proved it. The lives of the people I've accompanied kept proving it. Again, and again, and again. And that is that without capacity, we can't consistently live what we know. Read another book, learn another framework, understand another theory, do another journaling exercise, try another nervous system practice. Some of those things may genuinely help. I've done many of them myself. Some of them have helped for a time. But every one of them asks something of us. They're asking you to implement, to practice, to remember, to return, to stay with something difficult. And without capacity, how do you do that? We've been putting the cart before the horse. We're asking, what's the next thing I should do? Before we've asked, what makes doing anything possible in the first place? You don't begin with the cart. You begin with the horse. The horse already possesses the capacity to pull the cart. The horse already has the inherent capacity to do what it needs to do. Eventually, I stopped looking for another answer and started looking for the place from which answers became livable, where that possibility lived. And that place wasn't an idea or a thought, and it wasn't an explanation, and it wasn't a technique. It was experiential, it was conscious awareness as something that can be directly experienced. When I orient there, capacity is available, reliably enough so that life becomes livable again. And from capacity, choice becomes possible. It's not a forced choice or a white-knuckled determination. It's not a Pollyanna joyride. It's living choice. A choice rooted in meaning. A choice rooted in purpose. A choice rooted in lived values. Now, here's something I want to say carefully. Connecting with my inherent capacity has not always been easy. Sometimes it can feel almost impossible. Sometimes trauma can drown it out, or grief buries it, or exhaustion can convince me that it isn't there. But difficulty is not the same thing as a falsehood or lack of truth. The clouds can completely hide the sun, yes? That doesn't mean the sun has disappeared or that it isn't there. In exactly the same way, the power of the thinking mind can completely overshadow the depth and capacity that's inherent in conscious awareness. That does not mean conscious awareness has gone anywhere. It just means we've lost contact with it. And when we've lost contact with it, we lose contact with capacity. They really go hand in hand. That's why this work has never been about fixing people or fixing myself. Nothing about you or me is broken. What's happened is that access to your capacity, it gets obscured by fear, by trauma, by loss, by habit, by the relentless momentum of the thinking mind. Look, I know you're searching. I know you want to feel better. I don't know what brought you here today. And I don't know what chapter of life you're living. I don't know what you've been carrying exactly. Maybe you're hanging on by a thread. Maybe you're grieving. Maybe you're frightened. Maybe you're overwhelmed. Maybe you're lonely. Maybe life has simply worn you down. Maybe you're carrying something that no one else even knows about. Or maybe you've just reached the point where you're asking the very same question, the one that changed my life. Why can't I seem to live what I already know? Whatever's brought you here, I know what it's like to have life ask more of you than you ever imagined it would. And I also know what it's like to wonder why knowing so much doesn't always translate into being able to live what you know. This work was born from that same place. This work was born from that same suffering. It was born from a deep longing to understand how a human being keeps returning to life even after life has asked the impossible, even while life keeps asking the impossible. You don't have to become stronger. You don't have to try harder, find one more answer. Just return again and again to the place where capacity naturally becomes available. And that brings me to something I know with my whole heart, and that is capacity is your birthright. Thank goodness. Life may not stop asking difficult things of you. Mine certainly doesn't. Yours probably won't either. And beneath all of that, beneath the thinking mind, beneath the fear, beneath the grief that may be going on, there remains a place from which life can still be met, little by little. Tiny dancer step by tiny dancer step, if that's what today asks of you. We return again and again and again. And it's not because you've found some kind of perfect answer. It's because you've begun returning to the place from which answers become livable. And the capital G truth and how that unfolds in your own life, which is where we started in today's video, has been, in my experience, not something that starts in the thinking mind. If anything I shared today resonates with you, don't take my word for it. See what proves true in your own direct experience, because that's how truth always unfolds. That's what's happened in my life. We live it. It's not an idea. If you'd like to learn more and have some experiential experiences of how conscious awareness, capacity, and choice points really work, we're only 9 days away from the workshop I'll be presenting on Saturday, July the 25th at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern. I hope you'll join us. Click on the link for more information and to register. And I'd also like to offer you our 7-day free email orientation, all about the differences between content and context, and the 3 C's of conscious awareness, capacity, and choice. You can find both links in the video description above this video or below in the comments section. Thank you for being here. I'll see you soon.